This is a screencast to support a lesson about school and education for elementary level learners, taken from New Headway Elementary, Unit 2, by J&L Soers and published by Oxford. The focus of this lesson is to support students to improve their reading skills with a focus on vocabulary and some speaking. So the first thing we need to do in a lesson is warm students up to have them thinking about the topic of the lesson. So in the book, there isn't a lead-in really prepared for us. So I've written some questions here that you can use as a lead-in. So you can display these questions and have students talk together about them, just to get them thinking about the difference between school in their own countries and school here in the UK. We can then move on to thinking about the text. So we can see here there are some pictures around the text. Snip out these pictures and put them on a slide and get students to think about what they think is happening in the pictures. They could talk together or they could put the ideas in the chat box. Get some ideas together, feedback from the students, what they think is happening. And then you can move on to activity number 1. All of this is before they read the text. So at this point, they still haven't read this at all. So we can show them these sentences where they need to decide which one they think is true. All of this at this point is still prediction. Okay, so we can show them the 8 sentences and do the first one together. You can read it together, get some ideas from the students, which one they think is correct, and underline it. Have them do the other 7 by themselves and tell them that later they will find out if their answers were correct or not. Before you pass over to teacher number 2, have a look through the text here and see if there's any vocabulary you think will block the students' understanding of the text. So this means any words that you think will cause them to not be able to understand the text at all. Not any word you think they won't know. If we look here at the teacher's book, it offers you some suggestions as to words that could be helpful to pre-teach. Okay, so now we get to teacher number 2, and we're going to look at this activity number 2. So first of all, they'll need to read the first paragraph. Set them a little time limit, maybe maximum 5 minutes, to read through this and look at the questions and write their answers. Okay, just write their answers individually. Do the first one together as an example. Highlight to them in the text where they can find the answer so they understand what they need to do, that they need to find the answers in the text. Then, when you've set the time and the time has come to an end, separate the students into breakout rooms and get them to check their answers together. If they don't agree with each other, they can highlight where they found it in the text. When you come back to the main room, nominate learners to share their answers and make sure that your answers are visual, so show them on your PowerPoint or on your screen. You're then going to move on to activity number 3. So they will need to read this paragraph of the text, busy days. Again, set a clear time limit. Then they're going to ask and answer the questions with a partner. So do the first one as an example with a strong student in the class. Spend some time focusing on the pronunciation of the questions. Think about how the words go together when you say them. For example, what time does he get up? Does he? What time does he get up? And think about intonation as well, that your voice rises at the end of a question. Then put students in pairs in breakout rooms to ask and answer the questions together. When you come back to a whole group, check feedback for the answers together. Okay, moving on to teacher number 3. you're going to go to activity number 4 here. So students need to read this last little part of the text, Baba's ambitions, and they need to correct the sentences. Do the first one together as an example, and then they do the other 3 individually. Make sure you instruct them to write the answers down. And then when you do feedback, make sure the feedback is visual so learners can see the answers and check their own. Finally, you're going to move on to exercise 5, which is for learners to check the answers that they wrote in number 1, the predictions that they made. They can see if their answers are correct or not. So for this activity, they will need to check back in the whole text to find the correct answer and then compare it to what they originally thought in the first activity. We can discuss in the main room with all students which ones they got correct and which ones they thought were different, and then move on to activity 6. So this will be the main speaking activity. So you are going to set this up ready for teacher number 4. So you're going to explain to the learners that they will be doing a role play where one of them is Baba and one of them is a journalist. So you're going to check the questions, make sure you complete the questions with the learners, and then do some drilling for intonation and word and sentence stress. Then finally, we're going to move on to teacher number 4, who will set up the role play. So put students into pairs in breakout rooms, give them their roles. So in each pair, one person is pretending to be Baba Ali, the other person is pretending to be the journalist. So the journalist will ask Baba these questions that the previous teacher has prepared. Make sure you use ICQs to check students understand their task before you put them in the breakout rooms. Do an example with a stronger student of asking a question and you responding as Baba. So make sure they understand they're pretending to be Baba Ali. They're not answering with their own answers. Give students a clear time limit so they know how long they have to do these questions and answers, and encourage the student who is playing student B, so who's pretending to be Baba, encourage them to give as much information as they can, and you can elicit some examples of the information they could give. Make sure you go around all of the breakout rooms to monitor what the learners are doing, but don't join in. Just make notes of any good questions or responses you hear and anything you think that you could use in post-error correction afterwards. If students have time, they could swap over roles afterwards. So the person who was the journalist could become Baba. When you come back to the main room, when the task is finished, get some feedback, some general feedback, what questions they asked and answered before you move on to some post-fluency error correction, where you can show them some of the sentences or questions that you heard during monitoring and ask them which are good and which perhaps need a little bit of correcting. You could include any pronunciation work here as well, if necessary. When that's finished, close the class, thank the students, and see them next time.